Hi, everybody. We're back again. It's noon Pacific and on radio 92.3 FM HD and on Radio Zindagi's FB Live page. We're back with voices again. And today we're going to discuss a very important topic. It is contentious, but we're going to talk about the war on Bollywood. Film people everywhere, whether in US or in India, are seen as liberals. Creative people tend to be free thinking and even sometimes bohemian, but they cannot be told what to do, generally by government or political parties. Hindi films, by and large, have reflected progressive views. By and large, I said. Well, we've seen Washington's politicians periodically denounce Hollywood for its biases, and biases is what makes it commercially viable, doesn't it? But many films indulge in flag waving of various kinds. Equally prominent Hollywood names like Robert De Niro, Meryl Streep, George Clooney have forcefully spoken out against Donald Trump when it needed to happen. The Indian film industry has very few outspoken voices. There is Anurag Kashyap, there is Prakash Raj, there are other people like Tapsi Pannu, Swara Bhaskar. All of these people have time and again spoken up against the government. Now, when this is happening, what is the government doing? The BJP has always been interested in the film industry. Narendra Modi likes to meet actors. You'll see pictures and selfies of him with actors. And Akshay Kumar did do a very long interview with the Prime Minister before elections. But beyond all of this, why are these big Bollywood stars getting targeted by the BJP government in India? We have with us a very esteemed panel. We have Anna Vetticad, who is an award-winning journalist based out of New Delhi. In her 27-year career, she has worked across print, electronic, and digital media. She's the author of the book, The Adventures of an Intrepid Film Critic. You must read this book. And she's a prominent voice on issues related to gender, culture, and rights of the marginalized in India. And we have Zeba Fazli. Zeba Fazli is a research associate with South Asia program at the Stimson Center, where her research interests include geopolitics in South Asia. She is an MA in South Asian Studies from Columbia, and her thesis was Understandings of Muslim Identity in Modern India. But she also served as a research assistant at Columbia, and she put together an undergraduate course on Indian media and politics. Anna, Zeba, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Anna, let's start. Thanks for being here. Anna, let's start with you. What is going on with all these attacks on Bollywood celebrities?
Meera, first, for the benefit of listeners in the United States, I think I should make it clear that the Indian film industry is far more diverse than just Bollywood. And in response to the political developments of the past 7 years, when we've had a far-right Hindu nationalist government ruling India, the Hindi film industry, which is Bollywood, which is the Indian film industry most widely known in the West, has been surprisingly opportunistic, if not cowardly, and has barely spoken up in protest against attacks on religious minorities in India and other developments, including an effort to suppress the freedom of expression, not just of the general public, but the film industry itself. Unlike Bollywood, India's other film industries have been far more outspoken. You spoke of Prakash Raj, who is actually from the Tamil film industry, Kamal Hassan, who is an icon of the Tamil film industry. Recently, when we had elections, state elections in West Bengal, a large section of the Bengali film industry got together and made a music video appealing to the public not to vote for fascism. There have been voices raised against both state governments and the central government in the state of Kerala. So the Hindi film industry, Bollywood, has in the past 7 years distinguished itself, in fact, by its cowardice and silence. The people who you named from Bollywood, whether it's Swara Bhaskar or Anurag Kashyap or Richa Chadda, are exceptions. They are not the rule. The rule, in fact, has either been the Akshay Kumar type of person who has chosen to be a virtual brand ambassador for the Narendra Modi government, And then there are those who have chosen to be completely silent about the targeting of Bollywood. Last year, we saw it happen with the accusations that the entire Hindi film industry is a den of drug use. And again, right now, with absolute silence over what appears to be the targeting of Shah Rukh Khan through his son, Aryan Khan. So the Hindi film industry has behaved in an extremely disappointing fashion. And what we are seeing really is the present Indian government trying to whip them further into silence or into actually collusion, participation, and brand ambassadorship. Narendra Modi, as you pointed out, wants photo opportunities with all Indian film stars, but particularly Bollywood stars, because the BJP is a very North India focused party, however much it may claim to be a pan-India party. And most film people from Bollywood have played along. But I was watching a film just now, which I can't name because it's the preview of a film in which a member of the the British Empire in India said that a punishment is only effective if the fear of that punishment is instilled in the rest of the population. So it's not just about targeting one individual who has not been pliant, but it is also telling those in Bollywood who have been pliant and who have participated in whatever this government wants them to do, to point out to them that it just takes a click of the fingers for this government or the government in power to be able to bring their entire house of cards crumbling down. So any targeting of outspoken members of Bollywood is not just directed at those outspoken members to silence them, but also directed at others who have either not spoken or who have played along.
So, thanks so much for that perspective, Anna. Of course, Hindi film industry is just a small part of the bigger Indian film industry, which is big, which is one of India's biggest exports to the world. Zeba, last year when Rihanna tweeted something about the farmers' right, we had, India went crazy. I mean, I have never seen that power being used by the external ministry of India writing a letter and expressing their, I mean, the entire government got involved just because somebody criticized them, or somebody did not even criticize them directly, but pointed out to something be unfair happening, an issue, which is a world issue. But these were the same people, the people who stood up with the government at that point of time, were the same people tweeting Black Lives Matters just a few months before that, which just is the hypocrisy of the entire situation. These people are more concerned about Black Lives Matters when barely any Black people live in India, but they're not worried about their own farmers, people who bring food to their table. Let's talk about why they think they need to be with the times, these actors, and what is it doing to their credibility?
Mira, that's a great question, touching on a lot of things that we've been seeing lately. And also, I wanted to thank you for inviting me on this panel. Longtime Radio Zindagi listener and a huge fan of Anna's work, so thank you so much. So thinking about, I think, the Rihanna of it all that we saw earlier this year, I wrote for one of the Stimson Center's publications called South Asian Voices, kind of thinking about where this came from, because I think certainly in the national security community and even, the film community, the scale of the reaction that Rihanna's tweet and also Greta Thunberg and a couple of other of non-Indian celebrities tweeting about the retaliation against the farmers' protests was really surprising. They didn't understand it. They couldn't see where it came from. Which is fair, because if you're not paying attention, then what is there to see? I think, and what I argued in that piece for South Asian Voices is that the scale of the reaction is coming out of a long-time response playbook that the BJP government, particularly under Narendra Modi, has been using whenever faced with criticism it finds uncomfortable. And that criticism that it seems to find most uncomfortable is coming less from ordinary citizens or people in the diaspora, but from celebrities, particularly Indian celebrities. But in this case, we graduated to Rihanna, a global superstar and businesswoman and all the rest, right? So I think this points to kind of a longstanding discomfort with the idea of criticism again coming from celebrities. And I think what they most want, I think Anna pointed to this a minute ago, and you did as well, Mira, in terms of wanting not just photo opportunities, but being able to use celebrity attention or the appearance of celebrity attention in photo ops, in tweets, in selfies, and all the things that we've seen over the past couple of years to legitimize their government, to legitimize their policies, and increasingly, as we've seen, I think, most prominently during the 2019 election run-up, but also in the months and years since, to legitimize kind of the cult of personality, as some call it, around Mr. Modi, right? I think the BJP is very image conscious. It is very, aware of what plays online, on screen, and off screen as well. And what they're most interested in is what are the stories, who are the people, what are the narratives that will most obviously and most helpfully bolster not just their policy goals, but their right-wing ideology. I think this is what the BJP has stood for a long time, and their dominance of Indian national politics. I think certainly most prominently in the Hindi belt, as Anna was saying, this is not a party that has done particularly well at the state level outside of North India. But in any case, that's what they're looking for. In terms of kind of the Black Lives Matter movement that we saw coming out of the West, particularly last summer, and spreading, around the world, I think the hypocrisy, Mira, as you looked at it, I think what's most interesting is that it's easier perhaps for Indian celebrities to kind of join the bandwagon when it's something like Black Lives Matter, and harder for them to speak up about issues closer to home, right? They're not speaking up about the farmers movement, not speaking up against violence and discrimination against minorities in India, not speaking up about the caste system and all kinds of issues that they feel might be closer to home and therefore riskier to speak about, right? So I think it's not surprising to say Black Lives Matter. I think it's not hard either as someone with a nominally global audience, but it's much harder because they're Indian celebrities and Indian celebrities first to be able to speak, more clearly and more emphatically about issues closer to home.
Thanks, Zeba, for that insight. Anna, there were some laws that were brought in by the government last year in India to censor everything from journalism to movies to over-the-top platforms to streaming engines and the content. We saw how Tandav literally, the new season of Tandav literally got attacked by everybody. People hadn't even watched it. There were movies that were attacked without people really knowing the story of the movies as well. And then these laws come in, which are passed really questionably, and they were promulgated, yet they're being executed right now, and that's sent a lot of shivers down a lot of American companies like Amazon and Netflix as well. And whatever happens in India affects their inside into India. The same thing happened with Twitter as well. A lot of Twitter and Facebook employees were threatened with consequences. That's a platform, for God's sake. So how is this playing out with the journalists in India? I mean, of course, the credible journalists. I'm not talking about the outlets that just are, just voices of the administration.
Yes, Mira, thanks for making that distinction, because right now the Indian media is divided into two sections. Those who are doing the job that journalists are supposed to do, which is to question the government, and they are suffering constant online abuse, threats of legal action, actual legal action, being jailed. We have a journalist from Kerala who has been in jail now for 1 year for a story that he hasn't yet done. He was on his way to cover a rape that happened in northern India, and he was arrested on his way, and he's been just languishing in jail for a year. But on the other hand, unfortunately, the most prominent faces of Indian journalism today are the ones that have the money to make the most noise, and most of them have ended up being virtual spokespersons of the ruling party. I mean, you spoke of an interview that Akshay Kumar did of Narendra Modi, in which Akshay asked Narendra Modi what his favorite mango is. But then there's a very prominent journalist working with a Hindi channel who, in the run-up to the last general elections, did an interview with Narendra Modi in which she asked him how he gets his energy and what tonic he takes. Modi is not known to give interviews. The last time he actually sat down with a legitimate journalist who asks questions without fear was Karan Thapar many years ago. He could not bring himself to sit through that interview, and he actually got up after the first question and went away because he could not take the interview. But in the run-up to the 2019 elections, he did a few interviews with a few pliable journalists, and he got asked the simplest of questions. And he was able to, hold forth on issues related to even science, making completely unscientific statements, and he was not being questioned. He does not hold press conferences. He does not answer questions unprepared from the press. In one of the interviews that I'm talking about, one actually saw in the video, one of the people sitting there was holding a list of the questions that were being asked. So clearly he had been given those questions. So what is happening in the media right now is basically a targeting of any journalist who does speak up in various ways. And the others are, they can see for themselves, and young people entering for the profession can see that the ones who appear to be gaining ground, making money and getting a higher profile are the ones who are siding with the government. Obviously, that is not journalism. That's PR for the government. But it's very dangerous because there is a whole fake news industry that has come up. And in fact, there's a whole form of journalism that has come into being in India in the past 7 years to counter that fake news industry. So we have a whole lot of websites now who spend all their time fact checking because there's so much incorrect information floating around. Some of it put out by the mainstream media itself, some of it put out by members of the government, and some of it that just, appears without any, in an apocryphal manner on social media. Nobody knows who started it, but then it starts getting quoted by the mainstream media with that very easy question, hey, the social media is saying this, is it true? And then when it gets mentioned on the mainstream media, it's legitimized. So the effort to censor the mainstream media has, played to considerable advantage for the BJP because they've managed to either win over or intimidate large sections of the media into acting as government spokespersons. But it is also at a time like this that we are seeing some great, brave journalism by people, not just in the big cities, but in small towns and villages who are risking their lives, their livelihood, their safety, and continuing to take on the government. There was a journalist who got put in jail because he said that midday meals being provided to the poor in a state in North India under a government scheme was supposed to be a nutritious meal, and those poor children were being given just chapatis and salt. And he got put in jail for that. So, one sees the loud, noisy Fox News type Indian channel that is siding with the government, and they appear to be the entire Indian media, but that is not true. There are some wonderful journalists who are fighting very hard, and the Indian public, especially the Indian public, needs to put their money where their mouth is and subscribe to these platforms instead of continuing to watch the sensationalist pro-government platforms and giving them more viewership and therefore more advertising.
Thank you for putting that through, Anna. Zeba, thank you for being a Radio Zindagi listener. And you said you've been listening to Radio Zindagi since you were a kid. Well, thank you. We are on 92.3 FM HD Radio Zindagi and on Radio Zindagi's Facebook Live right now. Zeba, dissenting and opposing views haven't really gone well with the BJP and its supporters. A little while ago, I think it was Aryan Khan who expressed his and his wife's fear about the rising intolerance in India. And then he got attacked. Anybody who actually does anything, I remember Deepika Padukone going to JNU to stand with the students there, and then there was a diktat out for her to get her nose. these are very violent reactions to people just expressing their fears or their point of view. India is still a democratic country and right of speech is enshrined in its constitution. But all of these things that are happening is so unlike a democratic setup. So tell us more about how we view this in terms of the attacks on Bollywood, especially.
Um, that is a great question, and certainly one that I've been struggling with, and I'm sure so many others are as well, trying to make sense of it. But I think this gets back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of the attention that the BJP and central government has paid very specifically to Bollywood, as kind of the so-called national film industry. Keeping in mind, of course, as Anna was saying, that there are, so many other very prominent industries and very much more vocal industries. I think we certainly we can recognize the central government has its kind of supporters. We can look at, Kangana Ranaut and Akshay Kumar as kind of one end of our scale. And on the other are the people like Richa Chadha, like Anurag Kashyap, like Swara Bhaskar. And I think what's worrying is the increasing willingness of the central government to use the levers and mechanisms of the state that it controls to punish people it doesn't like, or to keep those who might be speaking up or might be less sympathetic to the government from speaking up, right? So I think attacks on Bollywood, I think Richa Chadha and Anurag Kashyap and a lot of others who are kind of more reliably vocal in their convictions and in their criticism of the government, I think it's no surprise that they get targeted with tax raids, as they were earlier this year, and has happened to a lot of other activists and journalists and news organizations who, again, are publishing much more critical coverage of Modi government, farmers' protests, all those kinds of things. So again, these are kind of the known problems. So obviously unsettling, but not surprising. I think what's more interesting to me is what happens when Deepika Padukone speaks up and what happens to her several months later, right? So
she gets called in. She gets called in for the drug charges, right? She was
investigated. Yeah, but I think Deepika's journey in terms of how she's spoken is really interesting, because of course I think a lot of this goes back to her experience during the Padmavat promotions, right, where a BJP politician puts a bounty on her head. A Karni Sena politician threatens to cut off her nose, right? Because of rumors, unfounded rumors that were, proven not to be true, that her character, Rani Padmavati, has kind of a romantic dream sequence with the character Alauddin Khilji, a Muslim sultan, who's played by her now husband, Ranveer Singh, right? This is, like Mira, you were saying, this is horrific behavior. This is not normal behavior in a democracy. And I think we can get to the Padmavat of it all, but I think that experience is one thing that we can point to in terms of driving Deepika's visit to JNU last year, on the week that Chapak, her first, I believe her first production, was about to come out, and standing with students who'd been attacked by an RSS affiliated mob earlier that week. So that was an incredibly risky move for her production, for her career, and it catalyzed an outpouring of support from other celebrities, and that A-list celebrities, people who had not really spoken up before about kind of the Citizenship Amendment Act, I'm sorry, that had been in the ether for a couple weeks by then. And I think that moment and kind of that turn in public opinion, as heralded by Bollywood celebrities most prominently, was really unsettling for the BJP. I don't think they anticipated that moment. And I think their attempts to bring people into the fold, I know there are a lot of reports of dinners that I forget exactly the positions, but that ministers and officials were holding to try to explain, why CAA is in fact a good thing. Those were poorly attended. Those were ignored, and it didn't really work. And I think that really precipitated a lot of the more recent attacks that we've seen over the last year. I think the COVID pandemic was also a turning point in terms of the outbreak, kind of precipitating a lot of sort of, I call it rallying around the digital flag, in terms of celebrities who did speak up for a moment, kind of were brought back into the fold to support the government's policies in terms of COVID lockdowns and kind of the Janta curfews and all these things that were happening kind of last spring. And And then I think the Sushant Singh Rajput scandal, unfortunately, and everything that catalyzed, including the kind of the drug nexus of Bollywood that happened last year with Rhea Chakraborty getting arrested and held without bail for a month, and Deepika herself. I think it's very hard to see that in terms of what had already been happening as not being colored by what they've said or what they've done or what the government may feel about how they react or how the kind of public narratives are in terms of their the support they are or are not getting from the people they pay the most attention to.
Thanks, Zeba, for that perspective. But we know that many industry folks in India are targeted by government agencies like the Enforcement Directorate, television channels, and other people from their own, there are fissures within the Bollywood industry as well. And it's open season on film actors and directors who are dissidents, especially who are dissidents, or in opposition to the government's views, explicitly or otherwise. But this is not new. In the 1930s, I don't know if many people know, the House of Representatives in the US set up the House Un-American Activities Committee to investigate communist sympathizers among ordinary citizens. In 1947, several Hollywood personalities were called and grilled, and the studios blocked over 300 men and women. Their careers, their lives were destroyed, and they could no longer get work. And many, like Charlie Chaplin, Orson Welles, even left the country. There are people like Dalton Trumbo who went underground and wrote under a pseudonym. Some were jailed as well. But many of those called to the committee refused to reveal names of their colleagues who were allegedly communists. But the witch hunt did not stop right until the 1950s when Joe McCarthy pursued so-called communists among the intellectuals, Hollywood stars, and writers. In India, too, this has happened before during the emergency when all efforts were made to rope in famous names from the film industry for the government's cause. And some, like Kishore Kumar, refused to sing for the establishment and found that his songs were banned on All India Radio, and his movie Kissa Kursi Ka was never allowed to be released. Now, there's also a case when the broadcasting minister, the information broadcasting minister V.C. Shukla, who took an excessive interest in the industry, traveled with a film delegation to Canada, and he knocked on Vidya Sinha's door at night and declared, "I'm Vidya, you're Vidya." Anna, this has happened before. Do you see this to be the case again? Is the Bollywood industry being used by the ruling party for its own gains? And is this the format that they're following?
You know, autocratic governments, in fact, governments across the world will always try to play a game with the media and the entertainment industry, you know, in milder ways. India had the emergency, as you rightly pointed out. The difference between then and now is that there is no pretense. And yet there is a pretense. There is no declaration of emergency in India. Seemingly, we're a democratic country. And yet, all constitutional authorities have completely lost their credibility because they appear to have become completely pliable to the government and are being used to target activists, to target celebrities of all fields, and in particular the Hindi film industry and students, ordinary citizens. So, I mean, the difference between the emergency and now is that at least back then, there was a declaration of emergency, and that emergency ended at some point after 2 years. Over here, we've had 7 years of an undeclared emergency, and it is getting worse and worse and worse and worse. A few months back, we had a comedian who, not coincidentally, is Muslim, who was arrested for a joke that we later learned for a joke that they said they expected him to crack. So not for something that he had said, but for something that they were expecting him to crack. And, you know, of course, the primary target remains Muslims and Dalits. Dalits have suffered under all governments in this country. For the Bharatiya Janata Party and its parent organization, the RSS, the primary targets are Muslims and Christians to a lesser extent, but the Muslim and Christian minorities in India who were identified by the RSS when it was formed almost a century ago, these two religious communities, these two minority communities were identified by RSS as the enemies of the country who should be subordinated or eliminated in priority over the British colonizers. The RSS did not consider the British colonizers enemies of this country and was not in favor of independence from the British colonizers. They identified Indian Muslims and Indian Christians as enemies of the country. So when they go after the Hindi film industry, for instance, in small ways, they have managed to get filmmakers to make films that have, there's been a steady trickle of such films that are demonizing Muslims in various ways. Sometimes it is Indian Muslims, sometimes it is the Muslim community at large, but with insinuations and implications about the Indian Muslim community. And it's ironic that they attacked the film Padmavat before its release, because once it was released, we all realized that it was an extremely Islamophobic film, which was completely pandering to the government's Hindu majoritarian narrative, demonizing, Khilji in ways that history doesn't bear witness to, romanticizing the practice of sati. And it's actually ironic that Deepika Padukone has been targeted because, yes, Deepika did go and stand with the students of JNU that day. And yes, the government did find that extremely unsettling. But the same Deepika was also acting in this Padmavat, which is an Islamophobic film, right? And Deepika, when she stood there, neither before nor after has she said a word either about CA or NRC or about the arrest of student activists or the arrest of other activists or the lynchings of Muslims. Just the fact that she went and stood silently with the students was enough for the government to target her, because what's the message? We've drawn a line. You cannot even stand silent with your silence being seen as support for liberals, or your silence being seen as support for an ideology that is not the RSS BJP ideology. So of course, when an Anurag Kashyap or a Swara Bhaskar is targeted, it's very clear. They are very vocal about their political views. But when they target someone like Deepika, what they're saying is we will not tolerate even one iota of the appearance of dissent. So, and as I said, the films themselves, Akshay Kumar acted in a film called Kesari, which completely twisted and distorted history and took a real war that was not a fictional war, but a real war that took place pre-independence, where a Muslim community in northwestern India fought against the British colonizers. And instead, the story of the film turned it into those Muslims being somehow anti-Indian, and the Sikh regiment that was fighting for the British were positioned as patriots. And so, whereas in reality, I mean, with all due respect to the courage of that Sikh regiment, the fact is they were fighting for the British Queen. But somehow that entire historical fact was twisted to make the Muslims in that true story fit the stereotype of the Indian Muslim that the RSS BJP has tried to build and perpetuate for decades now. So, and we've seen a steady stream of films like that, films that are distorting history, or films that are, stereotyping fictional characters. So it's not just about the BJP RSS wanting celebrities in real life to speak for them and stand with them, but also that they want films to promote the narrative about Muslims, promote the narrative about Hindus, about religious minorities that they want the country and the world to see. Now, unfortunately for Bollywood, it happens to be in a language that is spoken in more states than the other Indian film industries. And unfortunately for Bollywood, it is also the most prominent of the Indian film industries outside the country. But if the government, for instance, was actually focusing on the content in Malayalam cinema, the RSS BJP would be completely put off, because in Malayalam cinema, you have so many Christian and Muslim protagonists in addition to Hindu protagonists that it almost creates the impression that Hindus, Muslims, and Christians form 33% each of the population in the Malayalam speaking state of Kerala, which is actually not the case. So, but as of now, the government is not paying attention to the Malayalam film industry. It has tried to target the Tamil film industry to a limited extent, but fans and the public in Tamil Nadu, when the BJP went after an actor called Vijay because his film criticized Modi's demonetization policy, fans and the public in Tamil Nadu protested so strongly and supported Vijay so strongly that the BJP ended up looking extremely foolish. They even tried to bring out the fact that Vijay is a Christian. Because from his name Vijay, you can't make out what his religion is. They published a letter which had his letterhead with his full name because the BJP, despite all its efforts, has not been able to make sufficient inroads into Tamil Nadu. And so they're so ignorant that they thought they were informing the Tamil public that Vijay is Christian. It turned out that everyone in Tamil Nadu knew it. So the BJP ended up making a fool of themselves. But this is the thing. The industry stood by that film. The Tamil film industry stood by that film. The Malayalam film industry in Kerala, not only we have had instances of people from that industry speaking up against the central government, they have been critical even of the state government. So you can't argue that it's safer for them because they're in a state far away from the center of power or anything of that sort. The enforcement directorate can be sent after them also. The income tax, CBI, everybody can be sent after anybody in any actor in any state, not just in the Hindi film industry. But the other industries are taking risks that the Hindi film industry is not. And of course, people who have stuck their necks out and spoken out in Bollywood, people like Swara, people like Anurag, they have suffered consequences. Someone like Shah Rukh Khan. Now, it's not like Shah Rukh Khan has been unrelentingly vocal against this government, but they will never forget and forgive him for the fact that one, he is Muslim. Two, he has been quite open about his politics being a politics that promotes amity and that he wants communal harmony. He has, in 2010, you might remember, he had made a statement regretting the fact that Pakistani cricket players were not bought by team the Indian Premier League. And he was targeted by the Shiv Sena at that time. And an apology was demanded from him. He refused. Now the Shiv Sena since then, Meera, has done a flip and has positioned itself as a secular party. However, the wider Sangh Parivar, that is the family of the RSS BJP in India, will never forgive Shah Rukh Khan because he took that stand back in 2010 and made them look like fools. In 2015, around the time Amir gave the interview that you mentioned, Shah Rukh had also given an interview speaking about rising intolerance in the country. So although he has not been a very, very vocal critic, he's not been an openly vocal critic of the Narendra Modi government, still these small instances where he has registered his dissent and the fact that he's not come running to Delhi every time Mr. Modi has wanted a photo op. And ultimately, when Mr. Modi did get a photo op from Shah Rukh, it took so long in coming that to his fans and the liberal public, it was evident that this was not something that was coming naturally to Shah Rukh. All of these things will not be forgiven. But first and foremost, he's a Muslim. And the fact that he's a Muslim will not be forgiven. Right now, there are few crimes in this country. There are few things that are considered bigger crimes in this country than being a Muslim. And if you're a Muslim with an opinion, then of course you are the worst kind of human being as far as this present government is concerned.
Thank you, Anna, for that perspective. Now, since you bring in that perspective, there are two things that come off it. One is that minorities within the Bollywood industry are specifically targeted for having a voice or an opinion. And secondly is that a lot of people are targeted with the fact that they might be about to commit a crime, which nowhere in books of law anywhere in the world is a crime. right? So these are two aspects. Now, before we move on to the very important case of Aryan Khan, I want to ask Zeba a question. Zeba, because we do so much research, and you have spent so much time researching this entire intersectionality of Muslims in South Asia and their identity, and of course the politics of authoritarian governments. Most measures that Modi government has is indiscriminate tax investigations, trumped up accusations against actors and directors, intimidation, harassment in response to specific movies and shows. That's what happened with Tandav, for example. The
Right.
the director was Muslim, the actor was Muslim, and this entire fear factor that they keep pushing that, hey, try this and we will have the rap on your door. Where do you think we are going with this? Is this something that the whole world is seeing? And if the whole world is seeing, what do they feel about it? What it's open and shut for people who can look at it, from a secular point of view. But where are we going? Where is this taking India?
That's a great question. I think, like I said before, I think it's surprising to a lot of people in the global community and a lot of people kind of even in the India Watcher community, kind of working more on security issues. I think there's certainly an awareness that, the BJP is a far right party and that a lot of the policies that they've undertaken, whether it was demonetization, whether it was the sudden announcement of a COVID lockdown, all these kinds of things, CAA, NRC, kind of the laundry list of kind of incredible and perhaps surprising measures that they've taken. I think there's an awareness again that there are a far right party, that there is kind of a coalescing concern about authoritarian slide in Indian governance. But I think for a lot of people, particularly from the U.S. government, if there are questions, when there are questions about domestic politics, some kind of domestic outlooks, I think that's kind of has to be seen within the lens of security issues, of US politics in the region, of the rise of China and the US concern about China's role in South Asia and what we call extension, I should say, Southern Asia, including China, India, and Pakistan. I think there's a lot of concern about the resurgence of great power competition and the role that India can play to help the US counter China, right? This is where, the Quad comes in as a formulation between the US, India, Australia, and Japan. This is where a lot of the maritime activity in the Indo-Pacific region is coming up. This is also, I think, increasingly important in the wake of last year's India-China clash in Ladakh and Galwan Valley, the first time that blood has been spilt on that border in 40 years. So I think there are questions, there's concern, there's an awareness of what's happening, I think, more largely in India and society, if not kind of awareness of the film industry aspect of it. I think there's, again, a lot of concern about social media, about kind of the reaction and retaliation that we saw earlier this year in terms of Twitter accounts and coverage of the farmers' protests. But I think this all goes hand in hand from a lot of India watchers in the US and in the West with the role that India can play in geopolitics more largely, and particularly US-China competition. And the Indian government, Narendra Modi, just came to DC a couple of weeks ago for the first in-person meeting of Quad leaders. So he met with Biden, he met with Japanese and Australian leaders here in DC. So I think if there's any concern, it may well be outweighed by these larger strategic concerns about what can India do to help the US counter China. And I think in the Indian government, Modi and his colleagues are all very interested in seeing how the US could help them against China. And if that means that they are not questioned as severely, as vocally, as publicly about domestic politics, then I think they are fine with that trade-off. I think you mentioned, how does this look otherwise to kind of global audiences? I think things like reacting so strongly to Rihanna tweeting a CNN article, I think that's certainly concerning and it's certainly perplexing. But again, does that change the trajectory of US-India partnership, of kind of how the US and other countries look at China and what role India can play? I don't really think so.
But then there was of course, Vice President Harris did talk to. I mean, it was a very vocal statement that she made about human rights in India to Prime Minister Modi when he was here. And of course, this entire how Twitter the scene played out was also very concerning to a lot of companies trying to go into India to do business, because if their employees are going to be harassed and death threats being put out against them for just being there, Amazon with Thunder, Netflix with Bombay Begums, where they're speaking of alternate stories like normalizing interfaith relationships or LGBTQ issues. All these, even in India's National Commission for Protection of Child Rights actually called Netflix to pull the entire series because they said it would pollute the young minds of children. And the rest of the content doesn't. So when all of this is happening, how does the Biden administration even look at this normally? If human rights of American companies, if basic rights of American companies and their employees are not secured by the Indian government, and all these trumped up allegations are put against them, how does Biden administration even want to work with India?
I think the human rights. No, sorry about that. I'll speak very quickly, and then Anna, if you have thoughts, please jump in. Sure. I think human rights is definitely something that the Biden administration cares about. Nominally, it speaks about whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's other contested regions in the world. But I think, again, the Indian market is so large. So I think the multinationals, your Amazon, your Netflix, Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, I think they have, weathered a lot of dissent. They've weathered a lot of complaints. I don't see them leaving anytime soon. I don't think it will take a lot more, and I think a lot more concerted effort and a lot more kind of reaction, whether on the ground or from the government, for them to actually pull out and stop doing business in a place that is important to their growth as India. And then as far as human rights concerns go, I think, again, this is something that the US will say, but whether that will kind of put a significant enough damper to actually change the trajectory of the US-India relationship, I think that would be I'd be very surprised if anything happened in the near term to kind of change that in a way that is more than kind of conversations in public or hinted at, or at least hinted at in public. There's concerns. There might be some leverage that the US can use to kind of get the Indian government to tamp down. But I don't think that changes the trajectory of the relationship and of long-term US interests in India anytime soon.
Thanks, Zeba, for that thought. Anna, we have very limited time. We have 9 minutes left, and I want to cover the Aryan Khan case with you in depth. It seems that the bail was denied again today, and the bail was denied, and it's pushed on to another 6 days. Now, holding somebody in prison for because they found nothing on him, and India's laws again around narcotics are based on possession and not thought process or what they were going to do or the actions. Apparently, they told the court, NCB told the judge, that they want to hold Aryan because his WhatsApp chats might lead them to believe that Aryan is part of a very global drug racket. They think with his WhatsApp chats, but they found nothing in him or on him. This is human rights abuse, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But Meera, before I go into that, I just quickly want to address the points that were raised by Zeba, because,
sure.
Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are at the moment seen as at the moment, they are darlings of the American liberal public, because America has been through this very difficult and challenging phase with
ourselves.
Understandably yes. So. But the US's relationship with all Asian countries is marked by opportunism. And this is, never has it been clearer than this year, when the US ambassador to India actually went and had a meeting with the RSS chief. And I'm going to read out what Ambassador Atul Keshav tweeted after he met Mohan Bhagwat. He says, I had a good discussion with RSS's Sri Mohan Bhagwat about how India's tradition of diversity, democracy, inclusivity, and pluralism can ensure the vitality and strength of a truly great nation. What the US ambassador to India did is legitimize the RSS by going and meeting them. Would the US ambassador to any country go and meet the head of in any Western country, go and meet the head of a neo-Nazi party and say, I had a good meeting with him and we spoke about inclusivity and secular values? No. So, I mean, the fact that this happened is a huge blow to liberal values worldwide. And I'm very surprised that this is not a big issue in the West, but if anybody thinks
we did not even get the news, by the way, Anna. Let me just say, but we got the news when Donald Trump met Kim Jong-un. So we know what legitimizing terror is all about.
Yes. So, and if any Western politician thinks that what happens in Asia will only affect Asia, they're sadly mistaken, because the mischief that the US has played in Afghanistan has played out across the world, and even the US has ultimately suffered as a consequence of it. Now, to get to your question about Aryan Khan, I mean, there is, like I said, now there is not even, we are pretending to be a democracy more than actually being a democracy right now, because it is evident. I mean, I was just reading what Aryan Khan's lawyer said in court today, and he said that Aryan Khan did not have drugs on him when he was arrested. He did not have money to purchase drugs, and nor was he consuming them. And this has not been contested by the government lawyers. So if a person was not consuming drugs when he was arrested, if he was not in possession of drugs and he did not even have the money to purchase drugs, what have you arrested him for? This is like the Muslim comedian I mentioned to you earlier, who was arrested on the possibility that he might make a joke that would hurt the sentiments of people. This is how farcical democracy in India has become. The journalist I spoke to you about from Kerala, who has been in jail for 1 year, Sideep Kapan, again, not coincidentally, a Muslim. Again, it's 1 year and they've not been able to prove any charges against him. And what are the charges? I mean, you're exercising the charge sheet that came out recently basically implies that you cannot state facts while you are reporting communal tensions in India. That is pretty much what it is implying. So Aryan Khan's case, I mean, for the longest time, Meera, I didn't want to speak about it. And honestly, this is the first time I'm actually speaking on a show, because each time I thought, okay, let's give the Narcotics Control Bureau the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they will come up with something. Maybe they've been hiding some proof and keeping it confidential and they will bring it out. But as the days are passing by, it's very clear that this is just a farce. They have their target, it appears. I mean, it's so hard to not believe that they are targeting this young man because of who his father is. Because if that's not the reason, then what is the reason? Please come out and tell us what is the reason. Also, if that is not the case, why is it that the BJP social media army is out in full force to abuse Aryan Khan and Shah Rukh Khan right now? Why? I mean, what is, if the ruling party has no stake whatsoever in this whole drama that is taking place, then
what is the IT cell involved
doing this? Exactly. Yes. Why is there IT cell involved? So this is, like I said, they will not only try to keep you on the straight path if you are sticking to the line that has been given to them, and you are doing, as a movie star, doing interviews with Narendra Modi and asking him what his favorite mango is, but they will also punish you to ensure to preempt what you might do in future, or to punish you for something you did 10 years ago, or to punish you for having given the appearance of dissent even though you weren't very vocal about it. So, I mean, this is an all-round 360-degree comprehensive attack on freedom of expression and creative freedom in this country. And every liberal in India needs to speak up. Silence was never an option, but if anybody is silent right now, then it just goes to show that they do not care what is happening to minorities and marginalized communities in this country. And anyone who thinks that it will stop at just minorities is absolutely foolish, because that is not how things work. There will always be members of the majority community and dominant communities who will also end up getting targeted, either suffering as collateral damage or being targeted because they were not 100% conforming to. And you see, what the RSS BJP's vision of Hinduism is not the heterogeneous pluralistic society that you and I grew up in, right? Their vision is 100% homogeneous idea of Hinduism. For instance, right now across North India, during the Navratri celebrations, there have been goons, videos have surfaced of them in meat markets, forcing people to shut down their shops or threatening people to ensure that, and this has been happening for several years.
Well,
is every Hindu a vegetarian? No,
they're
right?
not. I mean, I'm a Brahmin, and we're not vegetarian because we were never vegetarian, even as Brahmins. But Anna, we could go on and on about this. This is so much to talk about in this case, and I wish we can do another episode of this continued discussion around this, because this is not only a human rights abuse. This is big. If this is happening to several people right now, it could happen to others very soon, because this is not stopping till people do not speak up. But the government or politicians in India may not be directly involved in the face of it, but through their institutions, they're sending a message to people who speak up, that if you speak up, you will pay for it. And it has a chilling effect on others who may be harboring dissenting views. And thank you so much, Anna. And thank you so much, Zeba, for being with us on this show and discussing this. It's been a ride discussing this with you. Thank you so much. We're here on Radio Zindagi, signing off now till we see you next week on Radio Zindagi 92.3 FM HD. Bye.